Yer is pretty a privilege. When the world treats you with grace based on an aesthetic, it may be hard to admit that there's a benefit to looking conventionally attractive. In understanding pretty privilege, I'll be dissecting some interviews, headlines, and various detailed and very boring case studies to argue that not only is pretty privilege real, but only hot people deny its existence, though that may not be completely unwarranted. Real quick, I want to thank my patrons, Joker's Juicy Ass. Gotta say that one quick so I don't get flagged. Spinoli, Cody Kolideski, Aaron Lane, Petruja Stepanovich, and Cooking with Silence. Thank you all so much. It really means a lot to me. And now that we got that out the way, to begin with, everyone is pretty to someone. That's where I come in. On a cishet scale, I'm about a 7 out of 10. Not the most good looking dude, but I do okay. I've passed the vibe check in interviews. That's why most companies do multiple interviews, by the way. They generally know if you're hired right after interview one. Hell, sometimes they know right after they read your application. But they want you to come back to see how you fit into the culture, and the right look is part of it. But I get it. Acknowledging how much looks can impact day-to-day living can lead into questions regarding competence and merit. And being a dude-shaped human, regardless of how attractive someone finds me, I won't have to worry about someone spreading rumors about me sleeping my way to the top. But yeah, to a lot of cishet women, I'm slightly above average. Now in queer circles, oh honey, I do very well. In the straight world, I'm just regular old fat Charlie. But once I head to a queer event, throw on some smell goods and put on a nice fit, shit, I may as well be Idris Elba. Okay, man's is getting a little old and people are beefing with him. I need a new reference. Oh, the brother from Moonlight. Now that's a handsome brother. Now if I look like that to cishet women, my dukes might have had them grandbabies she waiting on. Now the looks I would get in a gay bar were flattering. I was called beautiful and handsome all night. Yummy queer folks of various shades, sizes, and gender identities telling me how good I look, offering to buy me drinks or asking me to dance. But it also led to a lot of unwarranted groping, and in my 20s I found it flattering. Honestly, it wasn't until I was leaving this party in Brooklyn, Poppy Juice, absolute banger. But I was sharing a lift with these two folks and recounting my night, and it wasn't until I saw the mortified looks on her face that I started to even think like, oh, that's kind of messed up. I mean, it was brazen at time, like just a full handful of my slab while I was cutting across the dance floor. And the same men that vied for my attention all night would sometimes grow bitter when I wouldn't go home with them or chose someone else to play with. And resentment was obvious. I was recently hit on by a gay Trump supporter, and when I turned him down, he had to call Cassidy call me both a racist and an EBT recipient. You can't make this up. But being a 200-pound male-shaped human has its perks. Passing a cishet did the rest. I never really have to worry about being assaulted or stalked, but the same can be said for women, femmes, or folks of a smaller frame. Pretty privilege is real. It smooths life's rough edges, but it cuts both ways. And it begs the question, to what extent is physical attractiveness a source of inequality? In this video, we'll explore how beauty creates opportunity while reinforcing societal expectations.
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and gay, and I pity any girl who's in me today.
Those who benefit most from pretty privilege are often the very first to deny it. That's why I wanted to do this video, and I won't single anyone out because that's tacky. But that doesn't mean I can't view the overall scope of the argument. And one of the key issues surrounding the disdain for the idea of pretty privilege is based on responses from cishet men. When I saw this image, I understood immediately. I understood this one too, but that's probably because I dropped a lot of acid in college. But this one felt like the throwing down of a gauntlet, like, if you want something to gawk at, here, have a look. And I don't engage in a lot of pop culture, so prior to that photo, I honestly couldn't tell you what Doja Cat looked like. But I heard from every straight man and queer femme in my orbit just how attractive they found her, and that's it. It was never, yo, you should listen to this Doja Cat song. It was, yo, did you see the video, or did you see that IG post? But like a lot of women in show business and beyond, she has demonstrated a fierce autonomy in her promotional material cast in relation to her sexuality. And she dropped music videos for singles like Juicy, which show Doja dressed as a watermelon and cherry self-objectifying as edible and sensual fruit. Self-objectification as a result of objectification from the male gaze in media, where women are seen as passive and subjected to a controlling inquisitive gaze. And most women now reclaim this. Going forward, Doja was served primarily as an example of objectification within his discourse, though she, like my next subject, could also serve as examples of pretty privilege in line of colorism. Now, Spider-Man's boo thing, or the cream in his Oreo, will serve as an example of pretty privilege in terms of being a fair-skinned woman of color. For more nuanced discourse on colorism itself, I've left some links to videos on the topic that would do far more justice than I have time for today. But pretty privilege comes with added bonuses the closer your features align with Eurocentric standards of beauty. And I'm singling out Zendaya because of her flawless bitch slap she gave the industry. In a 2018 article, she's quoted as saying, "I'm Hollywood's acceptable version of a black woman." She also went on to say that as a light-skinned black woman, it's important that I'm using my privilege and my platform to show how much beauty there is in the African American community. Though even she can't escape the toxic grasp of beauty standards when at 19 she served as a cover model for Modeliste magazine and they photoshopped her body to make her look thinner and more waifish. It's not like she doesn't already have a petite frame. The young lady couldn't weigh more than a buck 20 soaking wet with rocks in her pocket. But pretty privilege, as we'll see going forward, also includes body type. Denial usually comes from discomfort. Acknowledging pretty privilege feels like admitting that success isn't always about hard work or talent. People push back because it sounds like you're saying they didn't earn what they have. It's easier to believe everything was purely merit-based than to accept that something as random as genetics could tilt the odds. But pretty privilege works quietly, often in ways that the person benefiting doesn't even notice. It's not just about getting modeling gigs or social media followers, it's being seen as more competent in job interviews, being offered help without asking, or simply getting treated with more patience and grace. In particular, unattractiveness is a discrediting stigma, and that is generally visible to others and can set off expectations and evaluations as soon as someone enters into a social interaction. And honestly, I don't see much changing soon. The second you bring it up, people get defensive, like acknowledging privilege means admitting they cheated. Some people may call me cynical, but I'd say it's just being realistic. I've stopped expecting people to embrace uncomfortable truths, especially after the last election cycle. If we can't even agree on basic human rights, how can we expect society to have an honest conversation on something as personal and ingrained as appearance? That doesn't mean nothing can be done though. We can make things easier and the first steps aren't complicated. Step 1. Accept that pretty privilege is real. It's not a theory or an internet buzzword. It's backed by studies showing that attractive people are more likely to be hired, promoted, or perceived as smarter, friendlier, or more trustworthy. Acknowledging that doesn't erase someone's hard work. It just recognizes that the path might have been smoother in some places. It's often assumed that what is beautiful is good. Physically attractive individuals tend to be perceived and treated more positively in daily social interactions than less attractive individuals are. This attractiveness halo effect reflects a physical attractiveness stereotype according to which attractive individuals are expected to be more sociable, friendly, warm, competent, and intelligent than less attractive individuals. Step 2. Understand that benefiting from pretty privilege doesn't make you a villain. Being attractive doesn't mean you owe the world an apology, and it definitely doesn't mean you're responsible for upholding a system that puts beauty on a pedestal while dehumanizing everyone who doesn't fit their mold. You can benefit from privilege without being the reason it exists, just like you can face struggles in other areas while still moving through the world with certain privileges.
Why you so obsessed with me? Boy, I wanna know.
Being pretty may offer a few advantages, but it establishes unrealistic expectations based on subjective standard. When an attractive woman disrupts beauty narratives by shaving her head or not wearing makeup or wearing the wrong kind of makeup, public perception can quickly sour. There's a scrutiny that comes with altering your appearance as if you need permission to decide how to live day to day. The moment women like Doja Cat, and again, she and everyone else I mentioned on this channel are just contextual examples, but as soon as they change anything, the floodgates open. I couldn't name a Doja Cat song before this video, and I only know who Zendaya is because I've seen the Spider-Man movies. Hell, I didn't know what Ariana Grande looked like before a CJ the X video, and I still can't name a song. And how weird is it that I know all the criticism surrounding these women and not a thing about their careers? It's certainly not because I go looking for the information, but the internet is a living entity and it has a big mouth. The most subtle critique mutates into this thing of its own, absorbing and transposing anything about their careers that's not tied to looks. But when these women and women like them break one of the unwritten rules on beauty, the scrutiny is going to be rough regardless of how they change. Let's break it down using Doja Cat. Now imagine a trident, alright? 3 points of impact. We have self-objectification within the patriarchy, one that doesn't understand nuance, and that one's dual nature. We have the male gaze, the objectification parallel to the self, and we have the broken rules. Now queer or pretty or not, this meat suit is male and it comes with privileges that allow me to live free of certain burdens, so I'll be treading lightly. But let's look at self-objectification for a second. I trust that we all understand what it means contextually, but I'm nothing if not a massive research nerd, so here's a streamlined definition. Self-objectification occurs when the objectifying gaze is turned inward, such that women view themselves through the perspective of an observer and engage in chronic self-surveillance. Now that's not the only definition, but I picked that one based on that dual nature I was referring to. That definition comes from a scholastic article arguing that the more a woman or femme self-objectifies, the less active they are in social movements. The author argues that objectification renders women passive and powerless, and consequently, women who do so may be only doing so in an attempt to gain a positive response from a male gaze or viewing it as flattering. It's damned if you do and damned if you don't, but that's the dual nature of self-objectification. Are you doing it for you or to gaze? More importantly, this prong is usually cis women patrolling the aesthetics and styles of other cis women, so on that point, can't touch this. But it's important to understand the stigma exists so much so that the discourse is written about in scholastic journals. Prong 2. The male gaze in relation to attractiveness. You drop a few pounds, you're too thin. Kick back and eat some biscuits over the holidays, you're too fat. Too sexy, too demure, too tall, too short, too ugly. For women and femmes, simply existing under the male gaze can be a chore. The idea that whichever way you choose to style or not style has anything to do with men, for lack of a better word, is trifling. It reinforces this antiquated culture of objectification, using that word a lot today, which leads to a lot of catcalling, creepy DMs, and what was she wearing debates, which shouldn't be a fucking debate. But that's a culture that flourishes when we let boys be boys, and that includes the male gaze. The third prong is about the broken rules, and images like these. Why would such a beautiful woman do that to herself is pretty much all I heard anyone talking about, and again, I don't go looking for this information. It's like through osmosis, just absorbing BS and drama regardless of if I want to know about it. But she broke the rule. She dared to dispense with the trappings of sexual attractiveness, and when that's done, it's almost like the reverse of self-objectification. Or rather, that's how it's perceived. But as with the first prong, the criticism comes from both sides of the gender binary. And I'm no better. I roasted Ariana Grande through most of a video, and I justified it on the merit of criticizing her use of language and aesthetics typically associated with black culture and then discarding it. And while my point still stands, it's hardly any different than people in their business for having a little work done. A bunch of us wish we could get a little nip and tuck, but it's still used as an excuse to police someone's body. But why do we do it? Presenting differently in queer versus cishet spaces has shown me both sides of the coin, and both sides suck. They call you beautiful and compliment you, offer to get you a drink if in public, they hold the door for you when you enter. They'll also call you ugly as soon as you say no thanks. They won't understand that no response from a DM is a response. And they'll drop their junk in your inbox. And why is it like the uglier the willy, the more they want to show it off? Engaging with women that date men or genderqueer folks is a world of difference from how I have to navigate with queer cis men. The trans men I've been with or interacted with in public don't do the "come here, I want to talk to you" line or try and grab my hand and get my attention. This isn't to say it doesn't happen, but it's like over 90% cis males. Now that's my life at a queer-friendly event or establishment, but for women and femmes, it's an all-day, everyday event. Beauty can feel like power, but that power often depends on adhering to social standards. And when the standards include preconceptions on one's character and or harassment simply for a variable that can't be controlled, who wouldn't want to be rid of that power? At least for a while.
You ain't got to lie, Craig. You ain't got to lie.
When I look at why denial happens, I noticed a pattern in how pretty privilege is spoken of. It seems that some of the confusion stems from a combination of vanity and the fear of being seen as shallow or undeserving. For example, some attractive people assume that being less conventionally attractive means no attention or harassment, which is false. The ways in which a conventionally attractive or a less conventionally attractive woman are approached are different yet parallel paths to the same destination. The primary difference is in how much public attention less conventionally attractive women get, which makes it feel so much worse when that same man will only hit them up after a cover of dark or a quick "you up" session.
It's 1:15. I'm all alone and I need you now.
When an attractive woman turns down attention and their response is, "nobody want you anyway," they know at least it's not true or that there's enough tension coming their way to dissuade such ideas. But when you're not the hottie, when all you get is a 2 a.m. cheeks call or the "let's just chill at the crib," the perceived privilege of those living, loving, and dating in the public eye can be more than frustrating. It can be demoralizing. Tell the person that gets called ugly, who may not have the ideal body type, that gets ignored in public, that pretty privilege doesn't exist. When you live in privilege of any form, it's hard to see it from any other lens unless you're willing to try. Doja Cat's rise was fueled by her talent, internet fluency, and let's keep it a buck, her conventional beauty. She fit the mold, marketable, attractive, and easy to package. But the moment she disrupted that image, shaving her head, leaning to more unconventional aesthetics, and rejecting the polished, hyper-feminine persona people expected, the admiration turned to ridicule. Fans who once praised her as a sex symbol suddenly found her weird or off-putting, proving just how conditional their support had always been. This reaction isn't new. Celebrity women are often treated as commodities, valued for how well they fit into digestible beauty standards. Doja's situation is layered. She benefits from privilege, being light-skinned, racially ambiguous, and already well established in the industry. But that privilege doesn't erase her struggles though, and it certainly doesn't make the backlash any less revealing. At the core of it, it's about control. The public loved her when she played by the rules, but the second she not only took control but did so in a way deemed ugly, it served as a reminder that beauty standards, especially for women in entertainment, are a tightrope. One misstep and you're suddenly unappealing. But what Doja's doing, whether intentionally or not, is forcing the conversation. Privilege and struggle can coexist, and acknowledging one doesn't cancel out the other. Whiteness, thinness, and Eurocentric features dominate mainstream beauty standards, determining who gets celebrated and who gets overlooked. Even within black excellence, there's a pattern. Light-skinned women like Doja Cat, Zendaya, or a Beyonce benefit from both their beauty and their proximity to whiteness. They're held up as a standard while dark-skinned counterparts, no matter how conventionally attractive, often struggle to receive the same level of praise or opportunity. Take Doja for example. She fits every traditional marker of beauty, fit, symmetrical features, and is incredibly talented. But she isn't spoken of, at least in terms of beauty and aesthetic, the way her lighter-skinned peers are. But it's not just about talent, it's about who gets to be desirable in the eyes of the mainstream. Even though beauty standards shift over time, the foundations and Eurocentric ideals of what is attractive stay stagnant. The trends come and go. Fuller lips, curvier bodies, wide or narrow hips, all shift. But the true standard or ideal still centers around whiteness. If we were to describe pretty privilege based on how it allows some to navigate the world, it'd be a racial hierarchy repackaged as preference. The conversation around Doja Cat's evolving look only reinforces this. The public turned on her not just for changing her appearance, but for stepping too far outside the boundaries of what they deemed acceptable for someone of her level of privilege. Although we may dream of a post-gender world, we are not there yet. And capitalism views women as having a privileged set of marketable attributes that are primarily connected to their reproductive function. Sexual objectification acts to shape women as both consumers with buying power and consumable objects. The hegemonic order is still racist, classist, and sexist, although it's finding new and creative pathways in which to discriminate. Pretty privilege is real, but it's fragile and conditional. On one hand, beauty allows for more growth opportunities. Generally, you're treated better compared to those who may have been scarred, injured, or otherwise not fit into the standard. Comparatively, being outside of the standard ideal of beauty may still cause unnecessary attention and feelings of inadequacy. But the comments are crueler. When you hear a, "that's why you ugly anyway," it can sting a little bit more. In terms of physical ailments or differentiating characteristics, beauty also includes perceived abilities. The recent provisions removing DEI are going to impact the infirm, disabled, and anyone else not fitting into the corporate mold. They don't have to hire a person in a wheelchair or cerebral palsy. A study I found conducted a meta-analysis to examine the relationship between physical attractiveness and perceived and actual intellectual competence in both adults and children. In support of the status generalization theory and implicit personality theory, attractive people were perceived as more competent than less attractive people. Attractiveness effects were stronger for men than for women, and stronger when explicit information about competence was absent than when present. Direct measures of competence were influenced strongly more by attractiveness than were indirect measures. That's part of the sting of denying pretty privilege. It denies how easy it is for the attractive or those without ailments to simply exist. This is something that I honestly don't know if is weird or petty, but let's say I'm watching an art, culture, or political science YouTuber, probably one of your faves, and I find them attractive, like,
Hey, how you doing?
I'll listen to the audio without watching. It's like I need to separate the looks from the message. If I still think they spit in facts or are engaging enough, I'll watch and subscribe. Don't get me wrong, I am not immune to the thirst. There's one on here that, make me weak at the knees. But it's an acknowledgement of these factors that makes it easier to not only engage with what I truly find engaging, but to also become better aware of my own biases. Acknowledging both sides has shaped my view on beauty and privilege, and it's my opinion that it's always better to be beautiful. I think pragmatically. The idea of living in a world detached from these, for lack of a better phrase, societal failings is a fallacy. An overall upheaval ain't happening. But locally, individually, we can do something in our own environments, and just start by acknowledging your own biases. Beauty can be empowering, but just as dangerous as juggling chainsaws. Be careful not to let the teeth bite into you.